If you're watching this video, you're probably a different kind of electric car buyer. Instead of outright range and efficiency, you're probably prioritizing performance, and it is in the model name of this particular variant of the Tesla Model 3. That's right, this is the Tesla Model 3 Performance, and it takes the regular Model 3 and makes it a bit mental. Personally, I actually think that the entry-level version of the Model 3 is the better buy, and you can read my review at the CarsGuide site or find it on YouTube. But that doesn't mean this car doesn't have anything going for it. In fact, I'll get to all the details in just a sec. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit like, subscribe, the bell notification icon to stay up to date with all our latest videos, or leave us a comment below. This is the top spec version of the Model 3 at $91,200 before on-road costs and extras. And our car does have one notable extra fitted. It's the white leather interior. I've called it the Hollywood Smile interior because it's so white, so fake looking, and well, it is not real leather, it's fake leather as well, so it seems fitting. Now you can separate the Model 3 Performance from the lesser models in the range by the 20-inch wheels, the fact that it sits a little lower to the ground, the dual motor badge on the back, and also that carbon fiber lip spoiler. We'll get to the interior in a sec, but before we do, I just want to mention the fit and finish on this particular car. It isn't fantastic. There are some panel gaps which don't match up side to side, and the boot looks like it's almost fitted a bit crooked. Now, we have heard that these issues are prevalent in US models. I've actually seen it for myself, and it's actually a bit disappointing to see that it's still a problem on a car that costs $100,000 or so when you get it on the road. Now, let's have a look in the cabin. I'm not going to cover off all the practical bits because, hey, if you want performance, pragmatism usually isn't high on your priorities list. So watch my review of the base model car for all that info, but I do want to show you some stuff inside before we get to driving. Just like the entry-level version, there's a 15-inch screen that controls everything in the car. There's no visible air vents, they're hidden away in the dashboard, and there's all that minimalism. But I want to show you a few fun elements to the screen. Let's have a look. Okay, let's have a look first at the arcade section. Yeah, that's right, there are arcade games you can play here on the screen, and the argument is that you'll do that while you're waiting for it to charge at a supercharger or something like that. That's fun, I guess. And then there's also a toy box where you can play practical jokes on people. There's a whoopee cushion, so you can put a whoopee cushion in the back seat and make your kids fart. That's funny. And then there's also Mars mode, which turns your maps into a map of Mars. That's funny too. Then there's another one called Ahoy Hoy. So rather than having call or phone as the menu controller, it says Ahoy Hoy. Rightio. That's great. Look, you might love these things. I think personally they're a bit gimmicky and Tesla could be spending its money elsewhere rather than making fun interactive elements on a screen. They could be spending it on R&D and fit and finish, right? And actually the most important thing about this entire screen is this little bit up here, the speedo, which it's great that it's there, but it would be great, Mr. Musk, if you could put one here in front of the driver's eyes, because you can get in trouble pretty easily in this country. The screen actually takes a bit of getting used to, and thank God there is a volume scroller on the steering wheel, because if you had to tap the screen every time you wanted to play with the volume, geez, that'd just be too annoying. Okay, so it's got some character in the screen and the menus and the games and all that, but let's see what the character's like when we get it on the road. Let's talk about the urban grind first and foremost, because that's where these cars will typically spend a lot of their time. In urban driving, in the CBD of Wollongong, where we are today, it's just below Sydney for anyone who doesn't know where we're talking about, it's pretty good in most situations. The ride can be a little bit uncomfortable, particularly over sharp edges, and that's because it's got 20-inch wheels and sports lowered suspension. And obviously, because it is electric, you've got instant torque when you need it, so you just put your foot down and it pushes you back in your seat, even when you're in chill mode, like we are now, and that's the more sedate of the driving modes. There's also a sport mode, and well, that thing's pretty sporty. So you've got decent acceleration. The ride comfort isn't terrific, but it's okay. The steering is a little bit heavy, and that's even with the steering in comfort mode, which is the lightest of the 3 different modes you can choose. And it does mean that when you go to do a reverse parallel park, for instance, like I'm going to do right now, you might find that it is just a little bit weighty at times, but it's never too weighty like some sporty cars can be. One thing I will say about reverse parallel parks though is that there's no surround view camera, and that might be an issue for some people. It's not for me, I'm a mad parker. So because it's a performance model, it's got uprated brakes as well, although I've been relying mainly on the regenerative braking around town, and what that'll do is basically just slow you down without having to apply any brake pressure at all. So right now, for instance, I'm approaching a roundabout, I just take my foot off the throttle and it slows me down. It won't slow me to a complete stop, but it does a really good job, and you get to learn it really quickly. And I will say that the benefit of that is that it feeds energy back to the batteries, which is a good thing and the main reason that it's got it. So in terms of the safety systems you've got on board, obviously there's forward collision warning and AEB, but the forward collision warning can be a little bit overbearing at times. It does tend to pick up on cars that might be well and truly within your braking distance and think that it's going to hit them. I mean, better to be safe than sorry, but it can be a little bit frustrating. Also, the parking sensors can go off at random times when you're at lower speeds. Again, it's a safety measure, but maybe a little bit unneeded. But unlike some other electric cars out there, it's possible to go a bit further afield in the Model 3 because of its battery range. So let's find some corners and see if it lives up to that performance badge. We know it can do crazy acceleration, so I didn't know it could be that fast, but it is. It's ridiculously fast. But the thing is, straight line speed is one element of performance. So let's see how it goes through corners. Obviously, it's got all-wheel drive, so it's sending drive to the front wheels and the back, which means that the steering isn't quite as pure as you get in the entry-level rear-wheel drive version. But I will say that it does have immense grip. For a car that's 1,850 kilos-ish, it does hang on really well in the corners. It isn't light, there's no doubt about that. 1,850-ish kilos before you put anyone or anything on board does make it pretty porky, but that's down to the fact that it does have a big battery pack. It's also got 2 motors instead of 1, so it's about 230 kilos heavier than the entry-level version, but obviously you get the performance as a result of that extra weight. And the weight, honestly, it doesn't really matter in a straight line because it's offset by so much torque. Being so heavy, it doesn't feel quite as agile as some competitor performance cars might feel in these sorts of situations, but I've got to say it doesn't feel too frumpy in the bends. I'm enjoying myself, but its real party trick is its straight line speed, so. And another thing I'm not so sure about is the ride. Now, it doesn't have any sort of adaptive damping, so you can't really choose whether you want it to be firm or not. And depending on the road surface, that can be an issue. On coarse chip roads with lots of potholes and pockmarks like we're on right now, if you do hit a sharp edge, you're gonna feel it, and it's not gonna be a pleasant experience, where some other performance cars do have adaptive dampers which will be able to iron out some of those sharp bumps a little bit more, well, maturely than this car. For me, the steering isn't quite what I'd want. It does have a bit of a numbness to it at times, but you can link corners together pretty easily. Being an electric car, there's no real noise to speak of from the motor. You do get a little bit of a whistle under hard acceleration, but it's pretty quiet generally, although on coarse chip surfaces like we're on right now, it can be a bit grumbly. All told though, this is no one-trick pony. It's not just fast in a straight line, it's also fast through the bends. Although maybe not the most engaging drive experience because of the all-wheel drive system. So what sort of battery range have we seen on test? Well, I topped this vehicle up at the supercharger last night before I came down here to film this car, and after about 140 kilometers, it's dropped about 220 kilometers. So you've got to be realistic with your expectations when it comes to what this little readout says and what you might actually achieve. Of course, you have to consider charging as well as part of your Model 3 purchase, and you can read all about that in my detailed review at the CarsGuide site. Now, I'm going to tell you what I think. So, fast? Yes. Fun? Yep. Functional? Yeah. And flawed? Unfortunately, it's a yes for that as well. If it weren't for the fit and finish issues of this particular version of the Model 3, it could be a mind breaker. It's a really fast and accomplished car in a lot of ways, but the fact that some of the doors don't line up and those little elements make me think about what other corners may have been cut in the production of this car. That might sound a little bit harsh, but you got to remember you're spending about $100,000 or even more on this particular spec of Model 3. I stand by the fact that the entry-level version is my pick in the range, but you can tell me what you think in the comments section below. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe, hit like, and also hit that bell notification icon to stay up to date with all our latest videos.